When the message first came in, the bunker lights dimmed from the power surge above ground, flickering like the breath of a dying beast. It was shortly after midnight, though time had lost meaning inside the concrete shell beneath Berlin. Officers moved with hollow eyes and stiff shoulders, each step echoing against the cold floors, as if the very structure were reminding them that nothing they did now mattered. Germany was collapsing hour by hour, street by street, heartbeat by heartbeat. The courier who carried the report looked as though he'd aged years from the walk down the bunker's long corridor. His uniform was soaked through from the spring rain, though it was hard to tell whether the moisture came from weather or fear. When he reached the inner room, he hesitated before knocking. He knew what the message meant. Everyone did, and no one wanted to be the one to hand it over. Still, he knocked. Inside, Hitler sat hunched over a map covered in pins that no longer matched reality. The pins showed divisions that had been destroyed, roads that no longer existed, and towns already swallowed by Soviet armies. But he insisted on keeping the map unchanged, as though by refusing to adjust it, he could force the world to obey him again. At the knock, he looked up sharply. The circles under his eyes were dark and hollow, and the once rigid lines of his expression now sagged with exhaustion and rage. He snapped "Enter." The courier stepped inside, his boots tapping against the cement. He saluted shakily and held out the message. "My Führer, urgent report from the Eastern Command." Hitler snatched the paper with a trembling hand. His fingers had begun to twitch in recent weeks, a tremor that he tried to hide behind his back or beneath the table whenever witnesses were present. But now he didn't seem to care. He unfolded the note and scanned the lines, his breathing growing harsher with each word. A moment later he looked up, his expression twisted. For a long moment the room was silent. Then he spoke. "The oil fields have fallen. No one breathed. No one dared to." The words hit the room like a blow. Germany's last hope of fuel, of movement, of tanks, of aircraft, of any shred of an offensive, was gone. The Soviets had taken the oil fields, and with them they had taken the final breath of the Wehrmacht. He crumpled the message in his fist, his knuckles whitening. "They failed me." He rasped the generals, the commanders, all of them. He slammed his fist on the table, sending pins scattering across the map. They should have held, they could have held, but the officers around him exchanged faint, haunted glances. They all knew the truth. Germany had nothing left to fight with. The soldiers at the front were boys and old men. The tanks had long been cannibalized for pots. Aircraft were grounded for lack of fuel. Even the trucks moving supplies around Berlin were running on fumes. Hitler's denial remained the only thing in abundance. He pushed away from the table abruptly and staggered to his feet. "Where is Käthe and Jodl? Bring them to me now." A guard hurried to fetch them. As Hitler paced, muttering under his breath, the dim light overhead flickered again. The bunker generator was failing more frequently now, and each blackout left them wrapped in a darkness so complete it felt eternal. Minutes later, Käthe and Jodl arrived, their faces pale, their postures stiff. They saluted and stood at attention, waiting for the eruption they knew was coming. Hitler thrust the crumpled message toward them. "Explain this." Käthe read the report, though he didn't need to. They had all known the oil fields were about to fall. They had simply hoped Hitler wouldn't learn of it until they figured out how to break it to him gently. But now there was no way to soften the blow. Mein Führer. Catel began carefully. Our forces were surrounded. The Soviets committed overwhelming numbers. There was no possibility of reinforcement. No possibility. Hitler spat the words. There is always a possibility. I have told you for years. Willpower decides fate. Even Jodl flinched. Hitler's voice echoed through the bunker, bouncing off walls that had heard months of the same rage, the same delusions. There would have been reinforcements if my orders were followed. Hitler continued, his voice rising. But no, my generals always believe they know better. They sabotage me at every turn. Traitors, cowards. His voice cracked into a rasp. The oil fields were vital. Without them, he stopped suddenly, as if the truth had struck him like a physical blow. Without them, there was nothing left to run the war. Jodl swallowed. My Führer, even if we still held the fields, the pipelines have been destroyed for months. Our refining capacity is gone. The facilities were bombed beyond repair. We have been functioning on reserve stocks for some time. Hitler wheeled on him. Are you saying the Wehrmacht has no fuel? Jodl hesitated. Not enough to continue major operations. How much? My Führer, perhaps enough for local defense operations within Berlin, but not beyond that. Silence fell again. Heavy, suffocating. The bunker felt smaller, as though the walls had drawn inward. Hitler turned away from them and stared at the map again. His eyes fixed on the pins marking the imaginary front lines, a front that no longer existed. Slowly, he pressed both hands on the table as if steadying himself. So, he said at last, the war is lost. Neither Catel nor Jodl answered. They didn't need to. Hitler clenched his jaw. But I will not say it. I will not. He straightened, though the movement looked painful. We will continue fighting. We will resist in every street, every building, every corner of this city. I will not allow myself to surrender to the Bolsheviks. I will not give them the satisfaction. Catel stepped forward cautiously. Mein Führer, if we cannot maneuver, our forces cannot regroup. Berlin is encircled. We must consider evacuation. Evacuation. Hitler snarled. I will not leave Berlin. I will not flee like a coward while German soldiers die defending this city. Jodl exchanged a quick glance with Catel, but said nothing. Hitler's trembling hand lifted to his forehead. He closed his eyes, breathing heavily. For a moment, he looked far older than his age broken, exhausted, and drowning in a tide he himself had unleashed. But then something hardened in his expression. If Germany has failed me, he said quietly, dangerously, it is because the German people have shown themselves unworthy. If they cannot win this war, then they deserve to be destroyed. A sick chill ran through the room. Even the air felt colder. The officers said nothing. Hitler sank into his chair again, gripping its arms as though they were the last things tethering him to life. His eyes stared forward, unfocused and burning with a mixture of fury and despair. Send word to the remaining divisions around Berlin, he ordered weakly. They are to hold their positions, no retreat, no surrender. Catel nodded slowly. Yes, my Führer. Hitler dismissed them with a faint wave. As they stepped out of the room, the tension in their shoulders loosened only slightly. They walked in silence, their footsteps soft against the bunker floor. In the hallway, they paused. This is the end, Jodl murmured. His voice carried no emotion, only a dull resignation. Without fuel, without reserves, there will be nothing left to move. Catel stared at the concrete wall ahead of them. He knows, he said quietly. Even if he denies it, he knows. Then why does he still demand sacrifices? Jodl asked. Catel didn't answer, because there was no answer to give. Inside, Hitler remained alone with the map. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. He reached for a pencil lying near the edge of the table and gripped it so tightly it snapped in his hand. The tiny crack echoed in the silent room. His breathing quickened. He stood abruptly and began pacing again, muttering under his breath. How could they fail me? How could they let this happen? The Soviets, the Bolsheviks, they are inferiors. They should have been pushed back long ago. It was the generals, always the generals. He kept walking, one step after another, his boots dragging slightly as though even the act of moving caused pain. At the far end of the bunker, the faint rumble of distant artillery shook dust from the ceiling. Berlin was being reduced to rubble above them. Hitler paused and listened. The tremor in his hand grew worse. For months he had insisted those tremors were nothing, just fatigue from long hours. But now they were constant, and even he could not hide them. He clenched his fists to stop the shaking. It didn't help. Another explosion rumbled, closer this time. Dust drifted down like gray snow, settling on the map table, the floor, his shoulders. He brushed it away angrily. Suddenly, the door opened again. It was Goebbels. He stepped inside with that same rigid, committed posture he always held, even now at the edge of ruin. His eyes gleamed with a fervor that seemed disconnected from reality, as if he were clinging to a belief system that no longer existed. "My Führer," Goebbels said quietly, "I heard the news." Hitler didn't respond. Goebbels approached slowly. "This changes nothing." Hitler let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Nothing. Everything has fallen. Everything." "No," Goebbels insisted. "We still have our will. And will, as you have always said, decides destiny." Hitler turned sharply. "Do not quote my own words to me," he snapped. "The war cannot be won by will alone. Not now. Fuel is the lifeblood of war. Without it, even the bravest soldier cannot fight." Goebbels did not falter. "Then we must fight with what remains. The people are ready to sacrifice. The Volkssturm is mobilized. Berlin will resist. They will die," Hitler said. His voice was flat. "Every last one of them. Then they will die for Germany." Goebbels replied softly, "And history will remember them." Hitler stared at him. There was something almost hollow in his expression, as though the anger had drained away, leaving only emptiness. "History?" Hitler whispered. "History will remember this as the greatest betrayal ever committed against a leader." Goebbels blinked slowly. "By whom, my Führer?" "By my generals," Hitler hissed. "By the German people. They did not fight hard enough. They did not believe enough." Goebbels stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. He knew Hitler was slipping deeper into delusion, but he would never admit it, not even to himself. His devotion had crossed into fanaticism long ago. "Even now," Hitler continued, "they expect me to surrender. They think I will beg the Soviets for mercy. They think I will flee." Goebbels moved closer. "You will never flee. You are the embodiment of Germany. Whatever happens here will define the future." Hitler's lip curled slightly. "Yes, that is true." He sank back into his chair, the weight of exhaustion settling on his shoulders. "Tell the people," he murmured, "that they are to fight until the last bullet. If the oil fields are gone, then our fate is sealed, but we will meet that fate with honor." Goebbels nodded, though the word honor felt strangely misplaced in that bunker filled with despair. "I will tell them what you command." Hitler closed his eyes for a moment. The tremor in his hand worsened. He gripped the arm of the chair until his knuckles turned white. "You know," he said quietly, "they think I am finished." Goebbels watched him. "You are the Führer. Only you decide when you are finished." Hitler opened his eyes. They were glassy, unfocused. Perhaps the two men remained in silence, listening to the distant thunder of artillery. Later that day, another meeting was called in the bunker briefing room. A handful of officers gathered, though fewer attended each day. Some had fled. Others had died. Others were simply missing, lost somewhere in the chaos-consuming Berlin. Hitler entered slowly, supported by the wall as he walked. His face was pale, almost ashen. He lowered himself into his chair with a stiffness that betrayed his physical decay. "Report," he ordered. General Krebs spoke first. "The Soviets have advanced to within 3 kilometers of the city center. Their artillery is concentrated to the east. We estimate they will reach this sector within 48 hours. Hitler nodded faintly. "And the Western Front?" "Gone," Krebs said bluntly. "There is no communication with the remnants." "What about Wenck?" Hitler asked, his voice hopeful. He was supposed to break through. Krebs hesitated. "My Führer Wenck cannot reach Berlin. His units are exhausted. They are falling back to avoid encirclement." Hitler stared at him. "No, he will come. He must." Krebs exhaled softly. "My Führer, he cannot." Hitler's expression twisted. "Lies, all of you. You lie to me because you fear the truth." Krebs bristled. "I fear nothing, mein Führer. I have told you the situation exactly as it is." Hitler slammed his palm on the table, the sound echoing. "Wenck will come. He will." No one spoke. The tremor in his hand worsened, and he quickly tucked it under the table. "What of Steiner?" he demanded. Krebs looked away. "Steiner's attack never materialized, mein Führer. His units have no fuel, no ammunition. They are barely divisions on paper." Hitler leaned forward, his voice cracking. "Then everything I have ordered has been ignored." Krebs remained silent. His eyes, however, spoke the truth. Nothing could be obeyed because nothing could be done. Germany had no means left to carry out any order. Hitler sagged back into his chair. For a moment he looked lost, confused even. The rage had drained out of him again, leaving only frailty. "One day," he whispered, "they will know this was all their doing, not mine." The officers looked away. He spent the rest of the afternoon wandering the bunker corridors, muttering to himself. He paused frequently, leaning against walls for support. Every so often, he would stop a soldier or clerk and ask them questions about the city's defenses, though the answers were always the same: collapsing, failing, gone. As evening approached, the bunker lights flickered again. A blackout plunged everything into darkness. Shouts echoed down the hall as people groped for lanterns. Eventually, dim emergency bulbs hummed to life, bathing the corridors in a sickly yellow glow. In his room, Hitler sat on the edge of his narrow bed. A single lamp cast a faint circle of light around him. He held the broken pencil from earlier and turned it over in his trembling fingers. The oil fields, he whispered to the empty room. "We could have held them. We could have. But deep down, even beneath the layers of ego and delusion, he knew better. The war had been lost long before the oil fields fell. But their loss had exposed the truth he could no longer hide from. The Third Reich was out of breath, out of fuel, out of time. The walls of the bunker felt close around him, like the tightening grip of a fist. The echoes of artillery grew louder. The trembling in his hands grew worse. He stared at the floor for a long time, unmoving. The bunker hummed faintly with the sound of generators struggling to hold on. Eventually, he rose and shuffled back toward the main room. Goebbels was waiting for him there, standing stiffly at attention. "My Führer," he said, "the people continue to fight." Hitler nodded absently. "Yes, let them fight. They do so for you." Hitler looked at him sharply. "For me, no. They fight because they have no choice." Goebbels's smile faltered slightly. "They believe in you." "Belief," Hitler murmured, "is a poor substitute for fuel." For the first time, Goebbels had no ready reply. He lowered his gaze. Hitler returned to the map table, though the map was now buried under dust and broken pins. The positions meant nothing. The lines were meaningless. The war existed only in the rubble above them. He placed his hands on the table, steadying himself. "I will not surrender." He said quietly, "Not now, not ever." Goebbels stepped forward. "No one is asking you to." Hitler's gaze lingered on the map for a long moment. Then he turned away, walking slowly back toward his quarters. That night he slept only in brief, restless intervals. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw flames, cities burning, armies collapsing, the Soviet tide rolling forward like an unstoppable wave. And in every dream, he saw the oil fields, once the lifeblood of his war machine, now burning under a Soviet sky. When he awoke in the early hours, the tremor in his arm was so strong he could barely button his uniform. A guard eventually helped him. By the time he returned to the main room, the officers had gathered again. The air smelled faintly of smoke from the fires raging above ground. The explosions were closer. The floor vibrated with each impact. Hitler stood at the threshold and surveyed the room. He looked smaller than ever, swallowed by his own uniform, dwarfed by the bunker walls. But his gaze still held a flicker of the old intensity, a spark of the fanaticism that had driven millions into catastrophe. He stepped forward. "This is the final stand," he said. "The oil is gone, the reserves are gone, the armies are gone, but we remain, and we will not yield." The officers remained silent. Hitler drew a slow breath. The world will remember this moment. They will remember that even when everything was taken from us, we still resisted. But the words felt hollow. Even he seemed unconvinced. Outside, another explosion thundered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Hitler closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he whispered the words that would echo in the bunker long after he was gone. "If Germany has no strength left to continue, then Germany does not deserve to survive." The room chilled. Many officers stiffened, some swallowing hard, others lowering their gaze. Hitler turned and walked away. He would never again mention the oil fields. But everyone knew the moment they fell was the moment the final thread snapped. The war had been lost before, but now it was dead, and the bunker became its tomb.